We have a panel here composed of the creators of Inferno, the curator and creative director and CEO of the Institute of Computer Sound and Music, who supported and developed the Hexadome experience, an artist who developed a project on the Hexadome, and then Andreas, who helped support the tour and fund the Hexadome. I'm going to let them introduce themselves first. So why don't we do that before I just rattle off a series of accolades, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves first.
My name is Bill Vorn. I'm from Montreal, Canada, North America. Well, with Louis-Philippe, we have made Inferno, so you're all invited to try it whenever you can. It's running until Sunday. As for myself, originally I was a musician in the 80s, like music composer and sound editor and a bit of everything, but mostly sound and music. And I started to work with making machines and robots for shows when I met Louis-Philippe early 90s. So it's been a while since we've been working with this. But Inferno is sort of really the latest work we've done with some kind of a new approach. Well, it's a bit experimental at the same time. And this is something that we really want you to try, and you're welcome also to give us your feedback, what you think about it, and how you feel being controlled by the system.
I'm Louis-Philippe Demers. I'm also originally from Montreal. Right now I live in Australia, in Brisbane. Just a little bit of background. In the 80s, I was doing some AI work at university, and I got bored and I went to art school. Then doing stage work, and then got bored from stage works, and we say, let's start play with robots. So this is when we started to do these kind of experiments. So that's a very fast track of the last 30 years of nuts and bolts. But the point of what links with the experiential moment is, I think it's kind of the zeitgeist of a lot of artwork these days. It's all about the experience and the space and the environment. So I think the beauty of these things is they speak to your bodies, they speak to your senses, and instead of like driving mainly your conceptual or your intellectual side. So it really challenges, reconnects you to, let's say, who we really are in a very basic way. So I think that beyond all these, what apparently looks very high tech, it's something that is very, very close to the core of your this living organism. So it's kind of you have to experience it to get an idea of what it is, and that's the beauty of it. It's something you cannot read in a catalog or somebody can speak about it. You just have to do it. That's the meaning of the word experience.
I'm Lara Sarkissian, and I'm from San Francisco. I'm a producer, filmmaker, and co-founder of record label Club Chai that is based in Oakland, and it centers diasporic artists who carve out sounds and spaces considering the way we build narratives that we push towards, I guess, like for the future, like current selves and future selves. So.
Good morning. My name's Nick Meehan, the chairman and artistic director for the Institute for Sound and Music in Berlin. We have the Hexadome here, ISM Hexadome, and this will be touring throughout North America over the next few months. The Hexadome essentially represents the first step for the ISM, which is essentially a campaign with 3 exhibitions, the first dedicated to immersive art, the second dedicated to sound, and the third dedicated to music, sound in a non-musical context and music in an experiential context. And really what this campaign is about is to create a home for these kinds of works to be developed in Berlin, and created in Berlin and designed to travel. So really drawing a connection between the work that's being done by artists there and internationally to cities throughout the world.
My name is Andreas Görgen. I'm the Director for Culture and Communication and Education in the Foreign Ministry. So basically, we put each and every year 900 million euros into education, into culture, and into communication abroad. And some words of background, I've started my career in the mid-90s in a theater called Berlin Ensemble. That's the ancient theater of Bert Brecht in Berlin. Then I stepped over to the film industry, did for 2 years, two and a half years, film financing in Germany. Then I contributed to cut off what was called in the beginning of the 2000s, the silly German money, so the film funds. Was working in the energy industry, and then was called in by a guy called Steinmeier, who is actually president of the Federal Republic, to do culture and communication in the foreign ministry. And we try 2 things. First thing is to support financially and politically open spaces. And secondly, to open those spaces to new kinds of narratives. So that's what we are doing, but we are part of the system.
The bureaucratic system. I love it. So my favorite, artist's favorite. Yeah, so I wanted to, I was lucky enough to go between the 2 experiences, and although we booked and curated the experiences, I hadn't actually experienced them myself, and so it was interesting to try to connect the 2 through actually seeing them, because we've been describing them, and I think that we'll find over the next couple of days we're all searching for words to describe what we're doing and what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and my connection for the experiences last night was seeing people first at the Hexadome, coming in, being very social, then immediately as the content started, just down on the floor. Just like in a meditative state, looking around, very quiet, almost in a zen zone. Come back to here, industrial techno, strobe lights, but I still got that same sense of the performers, the people that were engaged and in the machines themselves, getting into that same zone, the same meditation zone, as they let go of themselves and started to just feel and be something else and be somewhere else. I think there's this huge thing that you see once you see the show. You see people go into, okay, I'm gonna dance, and then 5 minutes later go into, okay, I need to let go, actually. I need to close my eyes and become the robot and become the experience. And then that goes into, okay, I need to get the hell out. So I'm just curious if there were any sort of magic moments that you've seen, or if there was an intention, and I think for both of you guys, what some of the magic experiences that you've had and people talking to you, what people have, has it changed lives? Has it, what has happened through this type of experience that you've created that you didn't expect?
I think first of all, when we did this, was really important that the people who will wear the exoskeletons will be taken from the audience, and they will be untrained, or they didn't know what to expect. That was important. This wouldn't work at all with, let's say, we have 24 of those, like not here, but with 24, like let's say, trained dancers, it will turn into like synchronized swimming really fast. So this is not what we wanted. So the beauty of the experience is that it's totally alien to yourself to start with. And you have to imagine when you're in your studio, maybe you can have a few friends around to invite and try it out. So the first time we did ever perform this, we had absolutely no clue of what would happen, because we never tried it. So the first time was really like not a soft launch, it was a hard launch to say, okay, let's see it. And it was quite curious for us as we were discovering what was happening as it goes. So I would say that's our own first, let's say, discovery or a magical moment. But I think the thing that happened most that is not necessarily surprising, but the paradox of it is that people enjoy it when they let themselves go. So they all say that there's a kind of some strange trance-like moment that happens at one point. So I'm not sure if I can see it in the face of the person doing it because we're a bit busy with the computers. But
I saw it.
but and there's also, of course, the scary moment at the beginning because you have no clue. So this is always fun. There's always a lot of nervous laughs at the beginning. So we kind of like some kind of a little grin on our face when this happens. But I don't know if you have.
Yeah, our piece is really, no, it's a lot about control and being controlled. Not only about that, but in major part. And it was very interesting to discover that at the end, like this impression that people have that enjoying being controlled. This is not something we expected at the beginning because we thought that it would be sort of a little bit awkward for to be in a machine and being not only becoming the machine, but also like being totally subjected to the machine. And this is really, I think it's an interesting and it's a happy discovery in a sense that this is something we can continue to work on and develop in future work.
I think we anticipated a similar experience to Berlin. When we first premiered the Hexadome in Berlin, there was it was very much it started out as a social experience, and it was interesting. One of the first installations we showed in Berlin was with Brian Eno, and he talked about. He kind of hit the nail on the head, which was essentially that people walk into a space. It's even for here, the location at Pier 70 is not typically known for doing these kinds of works or presenting these kinds of works, and so seeing the context is one part of it. Seeing then walking in and seeing screens from in every direction is another part of it, and the colors and all these things. And then talking about the idea of surrendering and that moment where you do hit that kind of contemplative state. And I think there is a natural tendency to kind of, want to see what's going on behind you. But once you let go of this kind of feeling, it is, I think yesterday was cool. It was to see this magic hour. I think it was about 3 hours in where everybody was just kind of lying down on the ground, and I think these are the moments that we live for in the with the Hexadome, anyways. So,
just as a creator, Lara, sort of building for this kind of platform instead of sort of creating the platform itself, did you consider that sort of these different kinds of moments or arc of the experience, and what were you hoping to get people through with your work? Was it, and how long is your work? Is it 20 minutes? I think most of the works are 20
minutes. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning of my production process, I was thinking about what immersive spaces have I already been in, like what physical spaces, and I immediately thought about 2 places, and that's being the club and also the church, and how these 2 spaces are they're both spiritual spaces, and the club being a spiritual space for people who don't necessarily feel connected to spiritual spaces in the traditional sense, in the institutional sense, and how in both spaces you are connected through sound and you're basically producing emotional and behavioral responses. And so, I was kind of thinking about those 2 spaces, but also it wasn't long before I started working on that I was visiting a lot of Armenian monasteries, and I was kind of obsessed with the architecture of the spaces and how certain monasteries are designed in a way to house certain kinds of sounds. And a lot of these places are, they're already very much integrated into the environment. They're like carved out of mountains and like boulders, and you're inside these cave-like spaces, and there's like a creek running beside you, but then there's also a choir singing, and how their voices are kind of bouncing off the walls and coming at you from all different directions, and yeah, and kind of how you're in dialogue, you know, same with the club, you're in dialogue with everyone else who's also hearing this music and feeling these vibrations and everything, and I was kind of sensing the same thing in the monasteries and the churches, so, but yeah, I mean, when I saw the dome structure, I immediately thought about the church and how I could kind of mimic these experiences in that I already feel immersed in these like human and real life elements. But yeah, during the production process, I was very much like detail oriented, and you're in control, and you configure, you know, where exactly the sound is coming from, all the movement that you map out and everything. But then there was definitely that moment where at Martin Gropius Bow, yeah, when I finally had it in the installation, I was like, whoa, it sounds really different in here. And how much the space echoed and reverbed your own piece, but you kind of have to step back at that point and be like, it's done. Right. And even last night, it sounded a little different than it did in the museum in Berlin, but again, at this point, it's like, that's a part of the experience, and you have to be okay with that.
I like the connection you made between the club and the church, or the gallery, or what have you, and just in terms of the congregation or the community and the experience that people are sharing. So there's 12 exoskeletons instead of one, and there's this sort of space that's made for hundreds of people versus one, and I think VR is not that, and so I think that and it's becoming more and more the way you can do multi-user experiences, and I wonder what your thoughts are and why that's sort of important to what you're creating.
I mean, we talk about shared direct experience quite a bit, and I mean, a lot of these technologies, as great as they are, can be somewhat isolating, and also I think just really before digging into the topic, the first thing that came to mind with immersion was more in terms of a single experience through VR and these kinds of things, and there is the potential to bring people together using these technologies, and really that's a big part of what the Hexadome is about, and also the next two projects, exhibitions that will follow. How can we bring people into a space to share in the experience together, to have a dialogue, or just really just have a sense of connection, you know, and that is a great way to put it. You know, these other contemplative spaces that exist, creating these kinds of environments or new kinds of environments is, you know, it's a pretty worthwhile goal to have, I think, in contrast to what it is that we're typically being prescribed, I think. So.
Just Josette,
Sure.
if you allow me to step in, just to put a highlight why your work with gray area is so important, why it's so important to get on that cutting edge between technology and immersive art. So the first element is it's important to create open spaces where one can experience other options, other kinds of worlds, and that's only art and science who can do that. They are protected against the political discourse and the way of thinking we experience in a day-to-day life. And the second element is we live in a moment where we can experience that our way of thinking humanity and dealing with nature, dealing with other people as objects, does not solve any problem. And there are two important sources. And one source is what you call spirituality, so being part of something which is beyond our day-to-day life. And the other source is technology. And what you succeed here with the Gray Area Festival is to bring those two sources together to say, okay, there's technology which can give access, and there is a kind of spirituality. And we will experience that from technology, we will experience that from the challenges coming from Africa, from the African philosophers, which are very much more oriented where the vitality of life and not to deal with objects. And that will change profoundly our way of thinking about art. So get the objects out of the vitrine and into the life. And that's the reason why we are so thrilled to work together with ISM, to work together with the Little Cinema in Brooklyn, to support such immersive experiences, because we think that will, in a couple of months and years, that will support to change our way of thinking, dealing with each object and with everybody as an object. It's not that it's an object. We have to get into a discourse where the otherness is part of ourself and will change our behavior in a capitalistic world, basically.